I'm here to guide you through the process of planting newly delivered bare root roses. This particular tutorial has been done time and time again by myself. It's available for you to watch at any time should you wish, here on YouTube, on TikTok, or on Instagram. It is also the subject of last week's episode of my podcast. So if you want to take me with you at any time, please do make sure that you have a listen to the Gardener Ben podcast. It's available for you to stream from Spotify, Apple, or Amazon Music. But I know a lot of you are really daunted about having your bare root roses delivered. You've invested a lot of time deciding which varieties you wanted to grow. You've watched hundreds of my videos here on YouTube, and you've then spent a lot of money on your roses. So here is the guide to actually planting them in one consecutive loop for you. If you have any queries or questions, don't hesitate to drop me a comment underneath the video, and I'll make sure that I answer just as many as you can. Right, before your roses are delivered, you're going to need to gather together some very basic equipment. You're going to need a fork, a digging fork. I prefer a small border fork, not a large one. It's much easier to handle. You're going to need a decent digging spade. This particular tutorial is about planting a shrub or a bush rose or a standard rose in the ground. I will do this again for planting a climbing rose and obviously for planting a rose in a container or pot, but you're also going to need a spade at this point. This particular one is from Bergen and Ball here in the UK. I like this one. It's got a nice lot of weight to it, makes digging holes really easy. A nice long shaft on that as well for getting deep down into the soil. You're also going to need some decent gloves, which I have to hand. You're going to need a watering can full of water, around 12 to 14 litres. Please don't skip this stage. You're also then going to need a bucket of rainwater. Personally, I prefer rainwater because it doesn't have any chlorine in it. If you wanted to make sure, if you don't have access to rainwater, make sure that you drain the water into your bucket around 12 hours before you actually want to use it. Leave it to stand outside, and that just allows the chlorine that's in our water here in the UK to simply evaporate off. Chlorine's really harsh, and much it won't kill your rose. It's not ideal that you submerge it into a bucket of something that contains a chemical you don't want to be using. You're also then going to need a large amount of soil conditioner, well-rotted horse manure, homemade garden compost, leaf mulch, or such. Now I have here, let's move this bucket out of the way. I have a bucket here of soil conditioner. This is actually fully organic soil conditioner from a local company called Eco Sustainable Solutions. This is very basically homemade garden compost made on a large industrial commercial scale, made from all of the green waste that's collected curbside. This is taken away and composted into this really lovely dark organic compost. Now by organic I mean it's not chemical or chemical free. Simply impossible to, once it's pulled in through multiple thousands of sources, to guarantee it's chemical free. But this is derived from 100% organic compostable waste. This is like caffeine hit to your plants. We use this everywhere in the garden. I've been mulching with this for a long time. This stuff's really good. You can buy this in bags. If you can't get hold of this, buy something similar, but well-rotted horse manure, well-rotted cow manure, and by that I mean it needs to be at least 3 years old. Please don't be using manure that's under 3 years old. It's far too high in nitrogen. You could damage your plants rather than actually give them a beneficial feed. So do make sure that it's well-rotted. Homemade garden compost, once again, needs to be around 3 years old. Well-rotted compost, or again, something like the soil conditioner. Now, the first part of this particular video has been done several times. This is actually the third time I've done this particular tutorial today. This particular rose in this bag has been out of this bag now 3 or 4 times. It's been planted in the ground and then been removed. So what we want to do, if you've ordered your bare root roses, they're going to arrive in a package that looks very much like this. If you've ordered 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 roses, they're going to arrive in this kind of cardboard bag. This is all fully recyclable and fully compostable as well. You can, if you wanted to, place this into your compost bin, you can put this into your incinerator, or you can put it into your curbside recycling bin for collection. So roses 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 roses are going to arrive in a bag that looks like this. If you've ordered more roses than that, hopefully through the link in my bio or for one of the links that I post, your roses are going to arrive in a box looking like this. Now, I'm not going to get into the contents of this particular box today. There's another dozen roses in here for me to work on at another stage. But your roses are either going to arrive in a cardboard bag like this, or they're going to arrive in a box like that. Now, if you don't have the opportunity of planting your roses immediately, please don't worry. These roses are all dormant. They've been placed, they've been lifted from the ground, trimmed back, roots trimmed, then placed into a bag, and they're absolutely fine in their original packaging, unopened. The most important thing is they are unopened and sealed. They can remain in the packaging for up to 2 weeks. You must store them in a cool, dry, dark place, in an outbuilding, something like a garage, a shed, a greenhouse, something that's not heated out of direct sunlight, a porch, something like that, or a carport is really, really ideal. They need to remain at an outdoor ambient temperature with no heat behind them, out of direct sunlight. And as long as you leave them sealed in the bag, they're absolutely fine. So if you're busy or you're ordering, for instance, somebody a Christmas present, make sure that you time this process perfectly. So you want to be ordering them around about 10 days before Christmas to guarantee that your person you're gifting them to has plenty of time to actually respond to what they need to be done. But they can remain in their original packaging like this, unopened, for around 14 days. Once that time has expired, it's then time to rehydrate the rose. And this is a really important stage. What you want to do is you want to start by opening your package. Get yourself your bucket of rainwater, depending on how many roses you've got. It depends on what size bucket or container you've got. So one of the flexi tubs is really good if you've got many roses, or just a standard size bucket of water is perfect. It needs to be deep enough to suspend the entire root system all the way to the graft point in water. You don't want any of the rows exposed. All of the roots need to be in the water. Start by taking your package and turning it upside down. There we go. Turn it upside down and shake your roses into the very, very top of your bag. Now, if this is a box, it's not so essential. You can open the box on a flat and level surface and open the box with no problems at all. I've, however, found that turning the bags upside down and forcing them into the very, very top of the bag is the easiest and safest route. Now, full disclosure, I've opened this bag on several occasions. So imagine I'm opening this bag, I'm tearing open the bottom of the packaging, and I'm reaching inside and I'm grabbing hold of this root, this rose. It's been in and out of this bag several times already, but I'm grabbing hold of it by the roots. That means I am not going to get spiked, I'm not going to get prickled, and I don't stand any chance of hurting myself. And I've got hold of the plant by the roots. You can see the plant is now wrapped up in its potato starch bag. This looks like plastic, but I can 100% assure you this is not plastic. This is actually potato starch. You can bury this anywhere in your garden if you want to do it. It will biodegrade in a matter of 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks, or you can add this to your compost heap, or put this in your food recycling curbside bin to be taken away. But this bag is actually fully compostable. Unwrap your rose very carefully, because obviously roses do have thorns. Unwrap your rose carefully and make sure that the rose is exactly what you ordered and it's in a condition that you would expect it to be. Now, roses from David Austin Roses come with a minimum of an 18mm stem girth. That's the stems that come off of the graft point. Combined, the stems need to add up to 18mm. Sometimes you're going to get 2 stems, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but the stems combined will actually add up to around 18mm and above. Different varieties will display different strengths of stem. You can see this one has a multitude of stems, but 2 main stems coming off of the plant there itself, and then a crown of growth on top. So do make sure that you're happy with the condition of your rose. Obviously, being a budded product, sometimes they all grow off on one particular direction. Sometimes you'll have a nice open crown, but that's going to be up to you in the coming years to prune that to create a nice balanced shrub. What we want to do now is we want to place our rose into a bucket of water for around 2 to 48 hours. Into the bucket it goes, suspended all the way to that graft or union point. You can see there that's all the way submerged, and it can remain like that for between 2 and 48 hours. Now, once again, if life throws you a curveball, if the kids get busy, the rain starts, you don't particularly feel particularly well after about 12 hours and you don't get around to planting it, don't beat yourself up. Roses are really, really hardy. Roses are very resilient. That can remain in that bucket for 3 or 4 days if I need it to be. As long as the ground isn't frozen, as long as the ground is not sopping wet and you're not actually in flood, you can then go ahead and plant. But between 2 and 48 hours is the absolutely perfect time to rehydrate your rose. So if you can imagine, I've now fast forwarded. It's now Saturday morning. It's not Friday afternoon. We're now all ready to plant. So I'm just going to get that rose out of the way. Leave it in the bucket for now. We want to make sure that it's as wet as possible, and we're going to move on to actually preparing our planting pocket itself. So you're going to need your gloves, you're going to need your spade. I'm hoping you can all see me. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to come forward to the camera and I'm just going to move the camera angle down for you. So please bear with me a second while I do that. a little untidy with these live streams to make sure that you can see. Now you can see on this part of ground, I've already dug several holes. This grows, as I say, been in there, in and out of the ground several times already. Let's move you around so you can see me. I'm going to move to a different spot. You can see the wet spot in front of me is where I planted the rose over on TikTok Live, not about half an hour ago. So I'll pop my gloves on. We are then going to dig ourselves our planting hole, which needs to be around 65 to 70 centimeters in diameter, 65 to 70 centimeters in depth. We're going to use our border spade just to do that. God knows what I'm going to dig up in this particular spot. Just move the soil to one side. Now, this particular ground has been mulched really well over the last 4 or 5 years. I've added loads and loads of organic matter to it, which means my soil structure is now beautifully and crumbly. But using your spade, you want to dig yourself a nice large planting hole, 65 to 70 centimeters in diameter, 65 to 70 centimeters in depth. You can see my soil is absolutely glorious. Make sure you break that up as you turn it out of the planting hole. Now, depending on the size of the root system your plant has, you may need to make sure your hole is a little larger. We're going to go through the next stages in just a moment, but just opening up that planting pocket, turn all of that soil out. Any large roots that you find at this stage, any large stones need to be discarded. We don't want to be turning those back into the actual planting pocket itself. Right, 3 or 4 more should see us done. Say, look at that. Very proud of my soil. Look at that. Absolutely beautiful and crumbly. I say the result of years and years of mulching, loads and loads of organic matter being added to that. Right, that's the hole dug. It's absolutely perfect. I say it's between 65 and 70 centimeters in diameter, between 65 and 70 centimeters in depth. And it's at this stage we want to mock up our planting pocket. Right, so I'm going to grab the rose. And we want to make sure that when we put the rose into the planting pocket, that all the roots are all nice and spread out. We don't want to be squashing up these roots, and we don't want to be concertining them up. We want to make sure this rose is heading in the right direction. We want it to plunge its roots far down into the subsoil where it can gain plenty of access to water. The most important thing is, now I'm going to come close to the camera, is the actual planting union itself. Advice on this has changed over the last several years. We used to plant the graft above ground here in the UK, but with our weather becoming much more turbulent, much more unpredictable. So 1 minute it can be 14 degrees, next day it can be -10. So we need to make sure we give this graft or union point as much protection as possible. And we're doing that now by plunging that into the soil by around 2 to 3 inches in depth. The graft or union point is actually, the plant is made up of 2 different plants. David Austin actually grafted all of their roses. The rootstocks are grown in tens of thousands. These are all one particular variety. And then the process is budding. So the actual plant that you buy, whether it's Gertrude Jekyll, whether it's a Stacey Vi, whether it's Penelope Lively, doesn't matter who it is then grafted on top. And this budded or union point needs to be plunged below the soil level, no matter where you're growing, whether you're growing here in the UK, whether you're in Europe, or whether you're in America, wherever you may be joining me from, you need to be protecting this union point with around 2 or 3 inches of soil. So that needs to be on the level surface and plunged just below the soil surface. So when we're mocking up the planting depth, you need to make sure that when you pop your plant into the hole, the roots are all nice and spread out, and that graft or union point is around 2 inches below soil level. You can mulch over the top of it as well if you wanted to, but you need to make sure that you're protecting this part of the plant that's actually very, very delicate and very, very susceptible to frost under the ground, especially for the first couple of years. Make sure that once you've done that mock-up and you're happy, I've obviously dug thousands of these holes before I roughly know how many, how big the size is. The size of this hole is absolutely perfect. I'm very happy with the depth. We won't want to put this back into the water. We want it wet for the next stage. So straight back into the bucket of water. We are then going to, with our gloves on, add a little bit of organic matter to the bottom of the pot, to the bottom of the planting hole. I said earlier we need around 25 litres, half a bag, around 2 gallons, which is around a large bucket of organic soil conditioner. I'm going to take a couple of really good handfuls of that and simply throw that into the bottom of the planting pocket. There we go, that's in. I'm then going to take my border fork and I'm going to break up the bottom of the hole. This is really, really important you do that. You don't want this rose trapped in this planting pocket. You want to give it the ability to escape and plunge its roots down into the subsoil. Incorporate that organic matter into the soil below. And once again, if you find any large stones, I mean, this is not particularly large, but just to show you, you should be. If you have any large stones, just take them out and disregard them. Break up the bottom of the planting pocket to a depth of around 8 to 10 inches with the entire depth of your fork, and make sure that you've broken that up nicely so that's not capped at the very, very bottom. We then need to move on to the next stage, and the next stage is actually the mycorrhizal fungi. This is not essential but highly recommended for giving your roses the best possible start. If you wanted to order this, you can get this off of the David Austin website. You can use this. You can use my exclusive online codes to get this for free. One particular sachet of the mycorrhizal fungi will actually plant 3 bare root roses. This product creates a symbiotic relationship between the roots of the plant and the bacteria in the soil, aiding in really good, strong root growth. This is not particularly essential if you're planting in a pot because those bacteria unfortunately don't actually exist in the soil because you're going to be using cleansed or sterilized soil in the pot. But here, growing in free soil in the ground, you really want to be making sure you use this. Roses are a huge capital investment. David Austin have ploughed 13 to 15 years into each rose that you receive at home. 10, 11, 12 years in the development of each particular variety, and then between 2 and 3 years to actually get the physical plant to you in the state that you see it. It's then going to take between 3 and 5 seasons to get the plant fully established in your garden and end up with one of the roses that I review for you here online. Get loads of messages from people saying, oh, the blooms that you share are so huge, your roses are so healthy. That's because I'm not reviewing a rose that's been in the ground less than 12 months. Normally around 15 months is how long they've been in before you actually physically see any media from myself. So do make sure that you give them the best possible start, and the mycorrhizal fungi will do that. 1 sachet of this is enough to do 3 plants. You need to make sure that you're sprinkling it onto the roots of the plant, not onto the soil. This actually needs to make contact with the roots of the plant, and that's why the plant has gone back into the bucket and is now wet. Right. So we are going to take our bucket, our rose out of the bucket. We're going to hover it above the actual planting hole itself. I prefer to swap hands with this and actually hold the mycorrhizal fungi in my dominant hand. I'm right-handed, and I'm simply going to spread the mycorrhizal fungi over the roots of the plant, rotating it ever so slightly as I go, and sprinkle that all over the plant. The excess is obviously falling into the planting pocket, but the important bit is that fungi is in contact with the root system. You can see there, they're all stuck to the rose's root system. All I want to do now is pull the label up because I want to make sure that I have access to the label, and I'm then going to go and head and plant. So I'm going to pop the rose back into its planting pocket. I'm going to pop my gloves on, and we're going to then incorporate some growing media. Around 2/3 of the 25 litres of growing media we allocated for this particular rose. You can see the heap of spoil, the stuff that I've thrown out of the pot of the planting pocket here. Just going to chuck some soil conditioner on top, keeping a little bit back for the next stage. And with my fork, I'm going to break up the soil that I've turned out and incorporate the organic matter into it. No matter what you're growing, whether you're using soil conditioner or whether you're using well-rotted horse manure or garden compost, same process. Break that soil up, incorporate your organic matter, and we're then going to literally hold the plant with one hand, making sure that graft or union point is between 2 and 3 inches below soil level. Hold that in place and then simply backfill with that enriched soil around your plant. Hold it steady, hold it tight, and it's at this point, if you have a particularly unbalanced rose with loads of stems growing off one way, you can tilt it ever so slightly in its planting pocket, whichever way you need it to be, to sort of right it and make sure that it's then growing in a nice, naturally upward state. So all you're going to do is bring that lovely enriched soil back around the plant. When you're around 2/3 full, ball up your fists and simply give it a really good squash down. You don't want to be too gentle at this stage. You want to make sure you're ensuring really good contact between the rose and the soil. You can see now that's actually squashed down. I've got a bit of a donut there, and I can now simply bring the rest of that soil back in around the plant, bringing that soil level up, and you say absolutely perfect on the planting depth there. Between 2 inches, that graft point is just below soil level. I'm then going to heel it in with the very, very heel of my boot, I'm going to simply squash that soil around the plant, ensuring once again that all of those air pockets are removed and that plant has really, really good contact with the soil below. Just moving the soil away from the plant itself there with my hands. Make sure the label is above ground. A little personal detail, a little personal preference of mine. I found planting thousands of roses that if you plant the label below ground, you can sometimes often end up with a little bit of a dieback point, somewhere where the plant actually rots off. So do make sure that that label is above ground, and don't skip this next stage. You want to be giving the plant a really good drink, no matter whether it's wet or whether rain is forecast, whether your soil is wet. Give it a really, really good drink at this stage. It's going to need between 12 and 14 litres of water, and that's going to seep down into the soil. It's actually seeping down into my knees. There we go. It's going to seep down into the soil and ensure on a micro level the plant has really, really good contact with the soil. You're going to need to make sure that you look after your newly planted roses well over the coming weeks and months. The rose is going to be fully reliant on you for between 3 and 5 seasons, and it's going to take a little while to get itself established. So make sure you give it plenty of attention. During the winter months, keep a good eye on it. Never allow it to dry out. And if it needs watering, make sure that you give it a watering can with water. And then once spring starts and the plant actually starts to wake up, make sure that you're watering it at least twice a week. Give it at least 12 to 14 litres of water, a whole watering can of water, once or twice a week. Don't skip that either. And as soon as the summer months come and the plant starts to grow away, keep a close eye on it. You might need to up your watering a little bit more regularly, but it's better to water your plant deeply with lots and lots of water at once than it is to water it little and often. You want that plant to work hard and plunge its roots down into the subsoil, looking for water on its own. If you water it little and often in little tiny dribs and drabs, sort of a couple of litres here, a couple of litres there. I know a lot of you say, oh, the watering can's heavy, I can't manage a whole one. Well, do it twice. You want to get that water right down into the soil to make sure that it's actually looking for water itself. Otherwise, it will never, ever stop being reliant on you. It will keep its roots close to the surface, and it will be reliant on you and become drought intolerant and be weak. Once the water has seeped in, you remember we saved a little bit of the organic matter back. All I'm going to do now is go ahead and mulch this particular rose. I'm going to spread around 10 litres of the organic soil conditioner around the plant and create a disc around 12 to 15 inches round and around a couple of inches deep. What that's going to do is that's not only going to add lots more organic matter to the actual planting pocket, giving this rose lots of nutritional value so it can actually grow away quite happily. It's also going to seal in the moisture below. And I know it feels like it rains all the time here, certainly in the UK at the moment, but it's going to seal the moisture down below the actual plant, the soil surface itself, ensuring your plant has everything it needs. It's also going to suppress weed growth around the plant, so it's not competing with other plants or weeds for nutrition or, more importantly, water. There we go, that's all done. This poor little rose is actually going to come back out the ground in a minute. I'm going to do this tutorial all over again over on TikTok. Don't forget, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to drop me a comment below. I will be doing this tutorial again in the next couple of weeks with a climbing rose, teaching you how to plant it against the wall and the distances we use. I'll probably be back somewhere in this location here, planting against the wall in a second. But I'll be planting a climbing rose and giving a little bit of advice how to do that. But this particular tutorial is for growing shrub or bush roses or standard roses, tree roses in free soil. There are also tutorials here on YouTube, TikTok, and on Instagram of how to plant in a container or pot as well. If you have any questions or queries, don't hesitate to drop me a message. I will see you all again very soon. Take good care now. Bye-bye.